Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. This is Infoblox, and we're going to be talking about enterprise-grade DDI for the cloud. My name is David Badowski. I work for Infoblox in product marketing. You can see my email address down there if you're interested in getting a hold of me. And I'll be joined by Salish Giri. Salish, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Hello, everyone. I'm Salish. I'm working as a cloud product manager at Infoblox. And yeah, I look forward to a great session today. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to spend, I don't know, about 30 minutes or so, give or take, talking about enterprise-grade DDI, and that's DNS, DHCP, and IP address management for the cloud. So we've got a bit of presentation for you. I've got some Q&A for you. So just as a couple of housekeeping matters, now let's start with Q&A. We love to answer questions. If you have any questions, just hit the little Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen, chat in your question. If it's something that's very specific to you, we will try to answer it, if we can, through the chat mechanism. If it's a question that's more general and something we think the entire audience will be interested in, we'll hold it to the end and then address it en masse. If for some reason the slides seem to be stuck for you, if it sounds like we're advancing and you're not, just refresh the URL in your browser. That should unstick you and bring you right up to speed. So with that, let me move along. So quickly, the agenda. What we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about how we got to this whole cloud discussion, some of the trends we see, some of the trends the experts see, enterprise-grade network services, kind of what is that, what do we think that means, and then some of the problems that we either experience on behalf of our customers or the ones that we're being told about. So we'll go through those relatively quickly and then get into the meat of the webinar, and that is, what are these enterprise-grade network services for the cloud? What are they, what do they do, and what do they do for you? And we'll talk to you a little bit about our solutions and then get into the Q&A and what next steps could follow. So with no further ado, let's just talk about kind of how we got from here to there. Some of this should be well known to you. I think all of it should be known to you, but let's just talk about the past and then present and then maybe the future. So I think we've all experienced this, right? What did a data center used to be? Well, it used to be a bunch of dedicated machines running dedicated operating systems with dedicated apps, and it all worked well and on our merry way, and that was the only thing we knew. But then came things like the need for capital expense efficiency, which is the fancy way to say reduce costs. So what happened? Well, things like virtualization was born, right? Lots of people went out, they bought vSphere, VMware became a big company, and instead of having dedicated machines with dedicated operating systems, you went a bare metal or bare metal-like approach, and people saved a fair bit of money, and this is kind of where most of the world sits today, if it's not already, though, migrating to the future. And we believe the future is being driven mostly by the need for operating expense efficiency, which is another fancy way to say reduce costs. So the world of today and tomorrow looks something a little more like this, more cloud-oriented, more container-oriented. So the data center will now be able to run its workloads either on-site in a virtualized data center, which I think most people will agree is a private cloud, and then onto the cloud, the public cloud platforms, be it something like AWS or Azure or another. And essentially you have here the hybrid cloud model where a workload can go from the data center to the public cloud as needed. So in terms of adopting clouds, what are the experts saying? So who are these experts, right? These are the analysts who get paid to study these things and produce reports. And I'm not going to read all of these data points to you, but you can see, according to these experts, which we listen to and we take with a grain of salt, but they're there. Cloud adoption is either happened or is happening or is going to happen. And the move is afoot and somewhere between a low of something like 43% using hybrid cloud to 81% already having a multi-cloud strategy. Cloud usage is a reality and is coming. So it is because of trends like this that we at Infoblox have to recognize it and address it, and that's why we're here today. And by the way, if anyone's arrived late, sometimes it happens. If you have any questions for you late arrivers, have any questions for us as we go, just input them to the Q&A button at the bottom of the panel. And if your slides are not advancing as we're advancing, just refresh the URL at the top of your browser. Now, if you don't mind, we'd like to run a little bit of a poll here. You saw the trend results that analysts are talking about regarding cloud adoption, their prognostications. If you don't mind taking a minute, would you mind answering our poll today? What cloud solution are you using? Public, hybrid, multi, or none of the above? We're not tracking these results by people. We just want to look at them in total, and that will help us gauge what we want to talk about during the rest of this webinar. But if you wouldn't mind taking a second, punching one of the radio buttons, and we'll all have a look at what the audience is doing today. So let me just give you a moment more, if you don't mind, just to offer an opinion. And let's see what the survey says. So public 11%, hybrid 43. Maybe those experts are right. Multi 25. None of the above 20. Okay, interesting. So the bulk of the responses are in this hybrid and multi-cloud use today. Some with public, and a few considering their options. Great input. We appreciate that. By the way, this reminds me to make a note to you. A copy of this presentation is going to be sent out to all the attendees. So take notes if you feel like it, but we are going to be sending a copy of this to you, and it will include this particular slide. So enterprise-grade network services, right? What is this? We can define it a lot of ways, but here are three tenets of what we believe what constitute an enterprise-grade network service. First of all, appliances, physical or virtual, they can be either, that are purpose-built to deliver robust, secure, reliable network services. Got to do that. Also, number two, an integrated and also robust database of all the DDI components: IP addresses, DNS addresses, and device data. This is enterprise grade. And finally, automation. Very important piece of this. Automate the provisioning and deprovisioning of these services using templates, wizards, APIs, as well as integration with other tools. And this takes network services to the enterprise grade level. This is something we've been doing pre-cloud and are continuing to carry that banner forward. What are some of the barriers that we've seen and been told about that exist for network services in the cloud? I'm not going to read all of these to you, but you can see there's a bit of a trend here: lack of a consistent and automated enterprise network. If the network is chunky, running out enterprise grade services is also going to be difficult. Discrete tools for different products. Discrete tools work, but they're inefficient. Documenting processes. Inefficient use of key resources. Manual processes that are slow and error prone. And finally, slow, unagile reaction to changes that are managerial, commercial, technical, what have you. All of these things and more contribute to making the deployment of enterprise-grade services in the cloud difficult. So finally, what constitutes enterprise-grade network services? Well, for clouds, well, it's everything we've thought about and we delivered in terms of enterprise-grade DDI for the private cloud, the data center. But in addition, integration with the cloud networks, coverage to support multiple clouds, not just one cloud, but multiple clouds. One thing we've recognized is that customers want choice when it comes to their cloud deployments, that they don't want to be stuck to one provider. Automating the management of services. It shouldn't be a manual process. This is 2019 after all. Open API support. You should be able to integrate as you see fit with other solutions, and where we can, doing that integration with a number of orchestration and automation tools. This function should be centralized to be efficient. So this is where we see the need. This is how we see it being formulated. And now I'm going to ask Salish to come on board and talk about some of the more specifics.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So, let me start with a brief intro about Infoblox and what we do, right? So, Infoblox is a networking company and a market leader in core network services that includes DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. It's a category that is known as DDI. And we have more than 50% market share in the DDI space. And then we have leveraged our DDI technology to create an industry-first actionable network intelligence platform that basically provides core network services, DNS security, network automation, and a host of many other features. Right. So. And along with that, I mean, we offer core DDI services, SaaS products, advanced DNS protection, DNS firewalls, etc. And obviously, we have a very, very, very strong presence in cloud as well. Traditionally, if we see all these networking services, right? I mean, whether it is DNS, DHCP, or IPAM, these services worked in silos, and they had their own set of limitations, right? So let me start with this example that I normally always give. Let's say you want to provision a VM, right, onto the cloud. So in order to deploy that VM on the network, typically you follow two steps. And in the first step, the VM gets an IP address from a DHCP server, and as a second step, a DNS record is created for that VM in the DNS database, right? But occasionally, in many companies, there's a third step also, where the network administrator then manually keeps an entry of the IP address that is assigned to that VM in its own database, right? So. Typically, if you see all these three steps, they are related, right? So you will have an IP address assigned via DHCP server, then a record is created in DNS, and the details are manually then entered in the spreadsheet. So typically, these steps are managed by different teams. And so during the provisioning process, you will have emails going back and forth between these teams, and it will take days and weeks, if not months, to get this done. So while virtual servers can be spun up in seconds with manual support, with manual network support and management processes, it will still take you days and months to provision your VM onto the network, right? So this is an inefficient methodology or process that many companies still follow. So in order to automate and simplify these steps, you need a consolidated DDI. I have a slide later that actually shows you how this entire automation is done by Infoblox. So this is one example why we need a consolidated DDI, right? There are other factors too, like network complexity, which is growing as a result of initiatives such as virtualization, cloud adoption, bring your own device, etc. So now you need a clear visibility into your resources more than ever, right? In order to actually to avoid any IP duplicates and server downtime. And also you need scalability. Let's say your company wants to create a 500 VMs cluster. So the network team cannot just update the spreadsheets manually for each VM and then create 500 DNS records. Manual IPAM just cannot scale. And that is where our DDI solution scores. I mean, our Infoblox DDI solution provides a consolidated DNS, DHCP, and IPAM solution, and a host of other network services into a single platform. Right, there is an easy-to-use management console and a central repository where you can just log in and take complete control of the Infoblox grid that manages your network. So you can, by logging onto that console, you can view all your network resources, what IPs are signed, and a host of other details, reporting, analytics. You can do lots of other stuff as well. We also have high availability and disaster recovery built in our design of our solution that ensures that you don't have any server outage or downtime. And finally, we offer flexible deployment options where you get flexibility to deploy our solution on-prem as physical or virtual appliances or even on cloud. And when I say cloud, it can be a hybrid cloud where you have some workloads running on-prem and some workloads are running on the cloud, or even on multi-cloud scenarios where you can have your workloads spread across multiple cloud platforms. So the kind of breadth we offer in our solution, I mean, it is unmatchable. Right? I mean, whatever kind of deployment you have, we have an offering for you, basically. Okay, so moving ahead. So I just spoke about multi-cloud, right? So this slide briefly talks about that. I mean, what our current offering is. So as you can see here, I mean, we have a grid that can run on different cloud platforms like AWS and public cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, and even on private clouds like VMware. And we are constantly working on expanding our solution base, where we are constantly adding new support for new private and public cloud platforms. So very soon you'll hear from us that we have added support for many other public platforms like GCP or Oracle, and a host of other private cloud options as well. Right. So I'll just give you a brief idea about our Infoblox grid. That actually is our solution that we sell to our customers, right? So an Infoblox grid, it enables you to achieve network automation in a hybrid or a multi-cloud environment, right? So I have slides later on that will talk about these briefly, but to begin with, a grid is a group of 2 or more NIOS appliances, right? So these appliances can either be physical or virtual, and they share a common distributed database. So you will have a grid master that is acting as a master for your entire grid, and then you will have grid members that will run different network services like a DNS, DHCP, IPAM, reporting, etc. So depending on the type of deployment, you can either have your grid master running in your on-prem data center, and you can have the grid members running in any of the external environments that you have, right? So each grid member can run any of the services. As I said, I mean, it can run DNS, DHCP, IPAM, etc. And normally the communication between these appliances, I mean, between grid member, grid master, it is secure, completely secured. I mean, it is secured by certificate-based authentication and SSL encryption. And normally we also provide an option where you can deploy your grid master as an HA pair to ensure service availability. So you can have a deployment model where you can deploy your you can deploy a grid master on-prem, and then you can have the HFA in any of the other environments that you have. So we have these kind of flexibility. And on top of that, we also provide a console, web-based console that we call as a Grid Manager. So this is an application that runs on Grid Master, and that provides you access to all the services that are running on the grid across your deployment options. I mean, if you have tens or hundreds of grid members running across your entire environment, you can take control of all those grid members through the Grid Manager, right? So this is a very, very nice and very unique offering that we give, where you can control the entire grid through that console. And this grid is actually a highly scalable solution where you can add new grid members very, very easily. So let's say you want to open a new office somewhere in a geographically different location. So it is very easy to just deploy our Infoblox grid member in that particular location and connect that to the grid. So it is extremely, easy and seamless. And yeah, I think this is it here, and let's move on. So network automation for cloud, right? So we have a concept called cloud network automation. So this actually is a process that will automate and subsequently simplify your enterprise networking for your cloud workloads, right? So you might have a hybrid deployment where some workloads are running on-prem and some are on public clouds like AWS and GCP. So this typically this network management, since you have the workloads spread across different types of cloud, this makes network management more complex, right? And managing such a complex deployment model manually is just not feasible, right? So again, let's just take the previous example. You want to provision a VM onto the network. So this slide explains, what problems and what inefficiencies you can come across if you're doing, if you're using the existing or traditional method of provisioning a VM, right? So let's start with this. When you want to provision a VM onto the cloud, right? So the first diagram shows you how that process, that workflow progresses. So typically a member from the virtualization or server team requests an IP address, the next available IP from the network team, and then it asks for DNS records creation to the network team, and for that he creates a support ticket. So network team usually maintains a pool of IP addresses. They assign an IP address for that request and creates a DNS record, right? So as I said, this method is inefficient. You'll have emails going back and forth between teams, and that will cause unnecessary delay in your provisioning. So you're not achieving a true cloud advantage, right? So this normally, the network team then gives you the IP address, creates a DNS record, and then you will have to then perform the same process if you want to deprovision the VM, right? So it becomes a challenge for the network team to maintain the accurate IPAM database. And obviously this is error prone as it is normally kept in spreadsheets, right? So the network team loses the visibility and control of the IP address space, and that causes IP overlapping or conflict, right? So in a nutshell, this makes your entire DevOps process more complex, more difficult, and obviously costly. So what Infoblox CNA process does is it takes away all these manual efforts, right, and provides complete visibility and control to the DNS and network teams. So sorry, I need to go back. Yeah, one second. Apologies. Yeah. So the Infoblox CNA offering, what it essentially does is it takes away all these manual efforts, and the Infoblox grid takes care of all these steps that are mentioned in the first diagram, right? So the entire workflow is automated by the Infoblox DDI grid. So you can implement any change real time here, as the complete process is automated, and there are no tickets going between network and server teams, and that will save you precious time. So this is the advantage that Infoblox CNA offering provides to the customers. Right? So yeah, let's move ahead, and let's talk about how Infoblox fits in the entire cloud architecture. Right. So this diagram essentially explains how where Infoblox fits in and plays a role in your cloud story. So here there's already a compute and storage automations options available in the market, right? So you have different solutions that take care of the compute and storage automation, but we don't have a true network automation solution available. So here you can see, I mean, you can have a cloud consumer accessing the entire cloud via the CMP, I mean, cloud management platform, and that in turn talks to the orchestration layer. So normally you have different orchestrators running in your cloud environments like Ansible, VMware, etc. Right? So you have those orchestration tools running, and then you have your entire cloud infra running, right? So Infoblox offering, what we have here is we have plugins. Those are entirely free to use and to download and use. So we have plugins for these orchestrators, right? So you can go to our website, download the plugin for VMware, install it in your environment and start using it. You just have to purchase the license from us, right? So we can have we call this adapters. I mean, so those plugins as adapters. So we can have those adapters for VMware. You have that for OpenStack. We have that for Microsoft and a host of other services, latest services like Kubernetes, Terraform, etc. So we have those offerings here. And for public clouds, what we have are appliances, right? So we have these appliances. These virtual appliances are already present on the public cloud repositories like AWS and Azure. So you can just go there and deploy our Infoblox grid instances directly from those public clouds. Right. So and for on-prem also, I mean, this actually does not directly fall under cloud, but we also have physical or virtual appliances that you can deploy on-prem. So we essentially cover the entire spectrum of your network infrastructure. Right. So yeah, so let's talk about some of the deployment models that you can have on the cloud using our Infoblox grid, right? So typically these are the typical deployment options that we support. You can deploy our grid on a hybrid cloud. You can deploy the grid if you want to achieve fault tolerance, or if you want to have the entire grid on the public cloud, right? So let's take a very typical deployment model that enterprises use in the production environment. So you have your critical workloads on-prem. I mean, I'm assuming the first example about the DDI for hybrid cloud. So typically you have some of your workloads on-prem, some of the mission critical or data sensitive workloads on-prem, right? And then you have some workloads on public cloud. So a typical deployment model here could be you can run our Infoblox grid master on-prem, and then you can have another grid member running on the public cloud that will take care of DNS, DHCP, depending on the type of deployment you have. And then that grid member can serve that particular VPC on your public cloud, right? So it can act as the authoritative server for that particular VPC. And this grid member periodically syncs with the grid master that you have on-prem. So at the grid manager, you always have the accurate data. So wherever your grid member is, all those members periodically sync data with grid master. So essentially, you have real-time data and the most accurate information at the grid manager level. Similarly, if you want to achieve fault tolerance, you can have a grid master running on-prem, and then you can have a grid master candidate that essentially is a grid member that is turned into a grid master candidate, or that is promoted to be a grid master candidate. So this candidate essentially keeps a database backup of the information that you have in the grid master. So this way you can, and this grid master candidate resides in a different environment than the grid master, right? So you are essentially getting a more fault tolerant deployment model here. And the third one is the DDI for public cloud, where you can have the entire grid, right? I mean, entire Infoblox grid on the public cloud itself. Right. Now, this example talks about how Infoblox plays a role of API proxy on AWS, right? So normally, Infoblox API proxy feature allows you to seamlessly integrate the automation of AWS cloud environment with NIOS, right? So normally, when you want to provision a VM, Infoblox grid member can just fit in that workflow, and it can honor the request, the API request that AWS clients like Ansible or Puppet send, right? So typically, whenever an orchestrator platform or an AWS client like Ansible or Puppet sends a request to provision a VM, that request first goes to Infoblox client, Infoblox grid member, and then it will perform the necessary actions like getting the next available IP and then assigning it to the VM, right? So, and then what it does is it forwards the actual request back to the API endpoint on AWS. So typically you have your VM spun up and and IP addresses and DNS records created in the same workflow. So you don't have to wait for getting an IP address from a different team, right? So this example shows essentially that you can fit Infoblox in your existing AWS workflow and achieve a complete automated VM provisioning process. Yeah, so this example talks about how you can sync your Route 53 information with Infoblox, right? So normally they'll start with, R53 or Route 53 is an AWS DNS service. So this service allows you to create private hosted zones or public hosted zones for your VPCs, right? So what you can do here is you can sync those zones with Infoblox. So you can synchronize the zone data from AWS essentially to Infoblox. So Infoblox does provides a consolidated view of all your data across R53 and Infoblox DNS services, right? So you don't have to have two separate consoles where you'll go and keep track of resources, right? So you'll get a consolidated view at Infoblox end, and you can see the real-time information from both these DNS services, right? And after the zones are synchronized for the first time, right? From our Route 53, you can assign a grid member, an Infoblox grid member that can serve those zones, right? So you don't have to have DNS queries going to an external DNS services, Infoblox will then be capable of handling those requests as well. And finally, on top of this, when we sync the Route 53 data at Infoblox, and we also pull all the metadata like the VPC details, Route 53 ID, what kind of zones we have, etc. So you get a complete picture of the entire information that you had at Route 53. Right. So, okay. Now, Infoblox provides visibility into your network resources. We have a feature called as the vDiscovery process, right? So you can use vDiscovery to essentially to detect, collect, and then manage the information about your active host in your predefined network, as well as in virtual entities in public, private, or a hybrid cloud solutions, right? Such as, and any of the cloud management platforms such as VMware, vCenter servers, OpenStack, AWS, etc. So what this essentially does is it scans through. I mean, whenever you configure a vDiscovery job, that job will scan through your entire infrastructure. I mean, no matter where they are, whether they are on-prem, any of the public clouds, it doesn't matter. I mean, it will scan through your entire infrastructure, fetch all the data, and then provide a consolidated view to the user, right? And the best part of this is, let's say, let's say this vDiscovery job finds some new VMs, right? I mean, those are not there already in the Infoblox database. So what this job will do is it will automatically create the DNS records for those VMs. So you don't have to worry about that. I mean, whenever a new VM is discovered, the DNS records are already automatically created for those VMs. And we follow the same process for the VMs which are not discovered. Let's say some of the VMs are terminated, but the data is not updated in the DNS in the Infoblox database. So when you run that vDiscovery job, it will essentially release that resource from the database, and that IP is available to use for any of the other resources. So you get a clear picture and a most accurate information of your entire infrastructure. Right. So as I said, I mean, you'll get resource visibility. You'll have a single pane of glass to view your VPCs, instances, and networks. And you can schedule the vDiscovery job periodically so that, I mean, every time, I mean, you don't have to schedule it manually. You can do it periodically as well. And finally, I mean, you'll get a detailed view of all your networks, I mean, across different deployment options that you have. And this is the UI that you'll get. I mean, once you run the vDiscovery job, right? I mean, this is how you'll see the entire information about your different deployment models. So you'll see what cloud platform. So this example shows, I mean, after running the vDiscovery job, right? Here you can see network resources discovered from AWS, private clouds like VMware. You have resources from Azure as well. So a single job will discover all the resources across your different platforms and different deployment options, right? So you get details about cloud platforms, IP addresses, what availability zones they are in, what is the FQDN, and a host of other information, other EA and metadata information. So this gives you a complete picture about what is happening, what resources are there in your in your environment, right? And now we also have a very unique appliance that we call as the CP appliance, or the Cloud Platform Appliance, right? So Cloud Platform Appliances are nothing but the normal grid members that we have, right? But these CP appliances, they come with two additional functionalities. Like first is you get local survivability for your distributed data centers, right? So you can configure your CP appliance to handle the API calls that normally go to grid master, right? So you can configure CP to handle some of those API calls so that will reduce some load from the grid master, right? And you can handle those at CP level itself. So this gives you an advantage of not overloading your grid master with too many queries. And the other advantage is the API scalability, right? So in the beginning, I gave one example of your enterprise opening a new office somewhere in a different geographical location, right? So for those kind of scenarios, right, you can just deploy a CP member in that particular location, and you can have that CP member providing the authoritative DNS services for that particular zone, right? So and the scaling becomes very easy. I mean, you just have to deploy that and connect that to our grid. So that is it. I mean, you don't have to worry about any of the other things there. So broadly, this is what a CP appliance is, and what value it provides to the customers. And yeah, I mean, this is a typical deployment model that we have with CP and CNA licenses, right? So normally you have your grid master which is running the CNA license deployed in your corporate data center that might be on-prem, and then you have one private cloud running in some location, and you have private cloud 2 running in a different location. So there in private cloud 1 you can have a different cloud management platform like OpenStack or VMware, right? So and in the other one you can have a different one, and this private cloud 1 can have a grid member that will provide authoritative services to that particular private cloud only, and you can have other grid member or CP member providing authoritative services on the other cloud, right? And everything and all these appliances can take data with the grid master, right? So this makes your entire infrastructure very easy to manage, and provides you a complete visibility into your resources, right? So yeah, I think this is it from my side. I'll hand over to Dave.
Thank you, Saleesh. I appreciate all of that. Let me just kind of cap off the presentation part of this by noting that nobody works in a vacuum. Nobody can solve these issues in a vacuum. It requires us working in partnership with a number of companies. If you believe in the term ecosystem, that's what we do. So you can see, this is not an exhaustive list of the companies that we work with, but as Saleesh mentioned, AWS is very much part of our solution network, as is Microsoft with Azure. In the cloud orchestration space, we have been working with VMware for a number of years, as well as Red Hat, CA, DMC, Cisco, and others. And most recently, we've begun to work with the Ansible group. That's over there. That's the little A there on the right side. The Ansible group also had Red Hat to include the NIOS DDI solution within Ansible automation tools, so you can do rapid automation across a data center and across clouds. And this list will continue to grow. And working with partners is actually just part of what we do. So with that, let's move on to some of the questions and answers. I saw a number were submitted. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. We'll try to get to as many as we can here in the remaining time. So let me be the quiz master. I'll read off some of the questions here and parse them out to people who can answer them. Some of which would be me. So here's a question. Should cloud adoption make me think differently about how I do DDI? Should clouds make me do DDI differently? I think the answer to that is it depends. It depends on what your objectives are and what you're doing today. Salish made did a pretty good description of what it's like in a manual world and versus an automated world. So if you're managing DDI through manual processes today, and if you're seeking automation, then yes, thinking differently is probably a good idea. If you're thinking about multiple cloud platforms, you probably want to factor that into your thinking as well. DDI should be able to support multiple or be integrated with multiple clouds if that's your direction. Another question here: don't most DDI solutions, support public and hybrid clouds today? The answer is some do, some don't. Some support one, some support multiple. Here again, the move toward multi-cloud is kind of an important factor. If multi-cloud is part of your strategy, if it's a reality, those are questions you need to ask. Does a given DDI solution follow you to the multiple clouds that you're using or considering using? Here's a question that Salish, I'm going to ask you to respond to. Question is: we run vDiscovery today, but I don't think I've ever seen it create it. I don't think I've ever seen it create it. Excuse me. I don't think I've ever seen it ever auto-create a DNS record. Are you saying we can tweak the discovery process to do that for us? So can the discovery process be tweaked to auto-create a DNS record?
Well, yes. I mean, you can achieve that whenever you run a vDiscovery job, and then you find the job finds a new VM, right? And the details are not there in the database. The job will automatically create the DNS record for that, and then reserves that IP address if it is not if it is not reserved, right? So those processes are already there. I mean, you don't have to do anything on that.
Okay. All right. Here's another technical question for you, Salish. Can we run a custom Python script from Amazon Web Services to use the REST API to create subnets and DNS records within the Infoblox grid?
Well, yes. I mean, you can definitely send API calls to our Infoblox grid, right? I mean, you can do that. I mean, we have a very comprehensive REST API documentation on our support portal. So you can see the syntax. You can use that to create any of the network resources in our Infoblox grid.
Okay. Here's a question I don't think we have a direct answer to, but it's a really good question, so I'm going to just repeat it here for the audience. The question goes: I get the importance of DDI. At a previous company, we implemented full DDI with Infoblox. At my current company, no DDI, but lots of Microsoft. I'd be interested in hearing a general discussion on how Infoblox works with the newer Microsoft DNS and DHCP, especially DHCP failover load balancing. I don't think we can go into that here necessarily, but I think it does prompt me to think that perhaps that would be a good topic for a webinar in its entirety, just how to implement DDI within the Microsoft environment. So unfortunately, don't have a specific answer today, but I think that's something we probably want to address. There's another question. Do you have to be a programmer to automate DDI for a cloud? Salish, do you have to have deep programming skills to automate DDI?
Well, no. I mean, you don't have to be a programmer per se. because I mean the kind of documentations we have, right? I mean, it is very easy to completely work on Infoblox products. So you don't have to be a master programmer, right, to do that. So even if you're planning to use our APIs, right? I mean REST APIs to talk to our Infoblox grid. So those are very standard and provide a very easy to use steps that you can follow and create those stuff and deal with our Infoblox grid.
Okay, great. Another question. What's the objective of delivering DDI services that span clouds? Well, the objective of DDI services that span clouds is simplicity. We believe customers, users, and organizations do not want to parse that task out cloud by cloud, data center by data center, zone by zone. A DDI service that goes everywhere enables choices, smooths operations, saves money, essentially meets a lot of the criteria that technical and non-technical people have for any such investment. Let's say here is we're getting close to our end of the hour, but we have a couple more questions here. Here's one that goes with Azure. How does the grid track new resources spun up? For example, a virtual machine gets an IP address from Azure. Parentheses, can't deploy custom DHCP in Azure, I believe. So the new VM gets a IP address from Azure and assigns it an Azure domain name. So does the grid track these resources as they're spun up? Salish, do we know the answer to this?
Well, Dave, let me see that question. I'm not able to find that question here. Who is this? Give me a second.
Yeah, it's the third from the top in your list.
Third from top, right?
Yep.
Okay. With Azure, how does the grid track resources spun up? That is VM IP address, the IP address from, for example, a VM gets IP address from Azure. Well, yeah, I mean, those details, right? I mean, let's say you have a VM that you need to spin up on Azure, right? So typically you cannot use Infoblox DHCP there because Azure does not provide DHCP support. They have certain limitations on the rate limiting part, right? So they don't allow, they basically limit the number of DHCP queries that can go, right? So that prevents essentially Infoblox to run its DHCP server on Azure. So they have their own DHCP server running there.
Okay. And we're running to the end of the hour, so we'll do one more question here, and there'll be about 10 unanswered that we will address directly. Is it a nice short question? Does multi-cloud support mean that there are grid members in each cloud environment? Perhaps that could be read in every cloud environment. So Salish, does multi-cloud support mean that there's a grid member in each and every cloud environment?
Well, typically, yes. I mean, you can have, to have a better deployment, right? I mean, you can have grid members running on each of these different public clouds, right? And then those grid members can directly sync with grid master and talk to that and then provide and then sync all the data to grid master. So typically, yes. I mean, you can have a grid member, one or more grid members running in each of your clouds.
Great, thank you. So if you submitted a question and we didn't get to it, we will address it by email. So just in case you're interested in following up on this, here are some resources that you can easily access. Several data sheets related to our DDI enterprise grade DDI services for the web. These will be live links in the presentation that we sent to you, so you can double-click and read them at your leisure. Again, you can also email Sailesh or me or both of us at the email addresses we provided.
Yeah.
So,
and as an alternative, you can also, if you have any queries later, you can put those questions directly on our support portal, and we'll be answering those queries directly there also.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Sailesh. I forgot. So to the audience, thank you for attending. We appreciate you carving out a bit of your day to hear what we have to say. We hope it was valuable. Again, if you have any more comments or questions, send an email to Sailesh or to me or to both of us, and we'll be happy to address them. So thank you for your time, and look forward to you on the next webinar.
Thank